Hi, Pippa. How are you?
I'm great because we're in the middle of rehearsing for our Edinburgh season, and it's been really great to have this time all together to make Edinburgh even more amazing than it ever has been.
Yeah, that's right. We take Showstopper, the improvised musical, to the Edinburgh Festival every year. This is our 12th year?
I think it's our 12th year. We've got our evening show, and we've also got a kids show, which is great. The evening show is in the Pleasance Grand.
That's right, at 6 o'clock every day.
And then the kids show is in Pleasance Do
at 12 o'clock every day.
So if you're interested in buying tickets, you can Google those words and you will find out how to buy tickets.
Yeah, and you can use the ticket to see the show.
That's right. And once you've seen the show, then you can listen to the podcast again, and maybe it would have given you a bit more insight into the podcast.
But Pippa, wait a minute.
What?
How do you rehearse an improvised show?
That's a great question. In many ways, people like to think of improv like football.
Yeah.
And so what we do really is we work on skills that we will then bring to the table once we are in the festival and have to just pop on a stage and make up a musical. So it's less like rehearsing musicals as learning and revisiting the skills that one needs to create a musical.
Yeah, very succinctly put, almost as if you're asked that question, every now and again.
Every now and again that question comes up, and I'm pleased to answer it every now and again.
But that's not why we're here right now, is it, Pippa?
No, we're here to introduce this month's podcast with Dan Gillespie Sells.
That's right, we got an actual rock star on the show. That's amazing.
It was so exciting, and he was brilliant, and I really loved the song that we created with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should just back up and say, he's a rock star. He was in The Feeling.
Yes, he was. But the reason he's on our podcast is because he created the music for Everybody's Talking About Jamie.
Yeah, first composer we've ever had on the show. So super exciting to hear just a completely different perspective on things.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's listened to previous episodes will really see that difference in particularly in the song at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth. Don't fast forward to the end of the episode.
No, don't fast forward. Never fast forward.
But listen to it all and then be excited about the song at the end.
And with us in the room, of course, was Jordan Clarke, one of our wonderful MDs, and he also accompanied Dan in the song.
And we recorded it at the Museum of Comedy in central London. Which,
if you are in central London, it's really, really worth a visit. They've got a lot of Russ Abbott stuff there at the moment. If you're like
at the moment and always.
No, it's a recent addition, actually, because Russ Abbott moved to Spain and decided that he needed to empty his garage.
Really?
Yeah, so they literally got Russ Abbott's garage. No, it wasn't his garage, it's his whole house in the UK has been emptied into the Museum of Comedy. So genuinely, they have loads of Russ Abbott stuff. That's a very 80s reference. Apologies to our younger listeners, but probably worth Googling a Russ Abbott just to have that in your lexicon.
Yeah, why not? For good or ill, Google Russ Abbott. But not until you've listened to this month's episode of the Showstopper podcast. Of the Showstopper podcast, welcome to another episode. Today's amazing guest is Dan Gillespie Sells.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
And also in the room we have Showstopper MD Jordan Clarke.
Hello. Thanks for having me too.
And if you've forgotten our voices already from the intro you just heard
30 seconds ago,
I'm Pippa Evans.
And I'm Pippa Evans too.
Now, Dan, we're genuinely really excited to have you. And also, I think you're our first composer.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Excellent. Yes. I mustn't let my composer colleagues down.
You're absolutely representing the entire race of composers right now.
You're just going to be like, composers are boring.
Now, I met you actually before Jamie opened.
Yes.
Because, of course, Dan composed the music for Everybody's Talking About Jamie, the smash hit British musical in the West End at the moment. And you were playing some of those songs at a sort of new musical theatre event on your guitar.
I think I was, yes.
So, first question, did you compose it on your guitar?
Mostly on the piano, actually.
Okay.
But there was that one song that I sang at that event, is the one that I composed on the guitar. And I thought, well, this character felt like a guitar-y character. So I just picked up my guitar and wrote it on that. But most of it is on the piano. I find the piano is easier to get around.
Sure.
Harmonically.
Well, that's interesting.
Whereas physically, much harder to get around.
Exactly. Ironically, the guitar is much easier to get around physically, but harmonically a nightmare if you're rubbish like I am. But sometimes you pick up an instrument you're not very good at, you write something simpler. So that's kind of how I'm not so good at getting around the guitar. Like I'll tend to stick to simpler chords and simpler things. When on the piano, it gets well fruity in no time.
Yeah.
Like I start doing augmentations and and before you know it, it's really fruity. And sometimes I don't want it to be too fruity. So I'll pick up a guitar and it's way simpler and more rock and roll or,
Did you also
basic.
find you had like characters that were a piano character then?
Yeah, I think that I tried to create musical voices for the characters. So in my head, it was like the music, when the music comes in the show, it's that person's pop star imagination. So it's who they would be if they were a pop star. So for Jamie, it's like all kind of basically like new disco kind of, his music is very much kind of pentatonic and kind of like scatty and kind of cool and young and vibey and all that kind of stuff. But Margaret, his mum, is basically Dusty Springfield.
Yeah.
So I write a song that I feel like her voice could be Dusty Springfield. And this is before we cast it. This is just before we even knew who these people were going to be. And I always thought that Pretty, the best friend, she had a guitar in her bedroom and she would kind of noodle the guitar and she'd be the kind of like slightly folky kind of girl who was a bit more like intellectual. Wow. So she's like listens to more intellectual kind of folky, guitar-y, girly music. That's her thing. So I wrote a song in that style for her. That's kind of how I started anyway.
That's so interesting. Jordan, because obviously you've composed 1,000 million songs.
I have, yeah.
And so what's your process when you write? Would you do something like that, similar voice thing?
Quite similar, yeah. It's lovely to hear, starting from a character perspective first and thinking about how they might think in terms of music, I think is really brilliant. The idea that they've got a musical icon or a musical personality that they would go to and think of or like that they would put Dusty Springfield on if they need to just like be quiet in their bedroom and let some emotions out.
Yes.
So yeah, very similar process. I think I tend to think in like styles of music rather than like an instrument. I love the idea that you kind of would go to the piano for Margaret or go to kind of that poppier world for Jamie. And I, in the past, have kind of gone, this person's a folk character and this person's a swing character, that kind of thing as well. So yeah, character first is a really great way to go about writing music for theatre stuff.
Yes, and it's a starting point. You just need a starting point sometimes.
Yeah.
You just need something to get you going.
Like the
because if you've got nothing and a blank page and it's really hard. And sometimes it's just like, I'm just going to find an angle. For me, that was just an angle that I could start with, Yeah. And I've worked on other pieces where it's not been that. There's another piece I've been writing, which is all Appalachian 1960s country. And that's a completely different vibe. And all the songs come from very much the same place, but the songs aren't really representing the characters in the same way. So actually those songs are representing the landscape and the seasons changing or whatever they have to represent. So it's a slightly different thing. So, and I had a starting point, which was, okay, Appalachian country. And I just did a load of research and then started writing in that style.
That sounds amazing. Is that something you would think of as, is that a musical? Or is that like a music and theatre
This is
thing?
going to be a little bit more music and theatre as opposed to a kind of musical in its purest musical theatre sense.
How did you end up going from being Dan from The Feeling to Dan who wrote the music for Jamie?
Well, I'd always wanted to write a musical. In fact, I remember there was a review. It was like a quite slightly kind of catty review about the Feeling record. Because at the time when The Feeling came out, everything was so like, everyone wanted to sound like the Strokes and I wanted to sound like the Carpenters. And it was a real clash. Yeah. And I remember put the record out and it did really well at radio because I think that it was like music that had chords and harmony and things. And it was a bit kind of all a bit bleak, like musically speaking, the landscape at that time, because everyone was so trying to be cool and indie bands are the thing. And I was like, well, I'm in a band, but I just want to write pop music. So, and then one of the reviews said that there was numbers on the album that basically sounded like they should be in a musical. And I think they were trying to be mean. And I was like, yes, that's great. I'm going to write a musical.
Objective achieved.
And so, and then it kind of that sparked a thought in my brain is that maybe I could, And then for years, I just was basically meeting people who I knew who were friends of mine or friends of friends who are writers and saying, do you want to write a musical with me? And they would inevitably go, yeah, sure, great. And then nothing.
Right.
Nothing. Because writers often talk about writing more than writing. So it took a really long time to find a writer who actually wrote. And then I did bump into someone who's Tom and we started writing as soon as we met each other.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was this guy, Tom, who I met on a demo. We were like out on a demo on the streets and I bumped into someone I knew and it was a friend of a friend, this guy, Tom. who was there, and he'd written Doctor Who, and he'd been writing a comedy Central show as well called Threesome. And he was just kind of interested in writing a musical as well as soon as he met me. And he, I knew of his stuff and he knew of my stuff. And we were just like, oh, let's do it. And we just did it, actually. We didn't know what we were doing, but we just started writing.
And did that turn into Jamie straight away, or did you?
No, that turned into the first thing we did, which never saw the light of day because we didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
We were idiotic. Because we did the thing of like, let's write the songs first. And we just started writing songs, which is great. And I think you can do that, but it's quite hard then to write a scene up to a song. And, and it makes life really difficult. So we started writing songs about a whole different thing, which was a TV thing of Tom's. And he knew in his head what the plot was and what the beats were going to be and how it was going to evolve. But we did, I suppose he was like, oh, let's do the songs first. That'll be fun, which it was. It was great. But I went up to Michael Ball, right? Weirdly. Well, I saw him at the theatre, and I had met him before because he'd been covering for Wogan, and the band had been on Wogan once, and he'd been covering for Wogan, so we were like a guest on it. So he had met me, and I kind of accosted him at the theatre and said, I want to write a musical. Me and my friend are writing some songs. Will you come and have a listen and tell me what you think? And he came around to my studio.
Wow.
Yeah, he came to Hackney, and that's a really weird thing, seeing Michael Ball in Hackney. It's just a weird combination of things, Michael Ball, Hackney.
Yeah, wow.
So he came to my studio, and he was really kind, and he sat down and he said, you haven't got a clue what you're doing because you've written these songs, but you're never going to be able to plumb them into a thing, into a narrative. And he said, you should probably meet a director who can show you the ropes.
Yeah.
So he introduced us to Jonathan Butterall, who had just come back from New York and had just had a meeting at the Crucible and had just said, I want to do a show in Sheffield. And I want to do a show based in Sheffield, set in Sheffield. And he also said, I want a pop writer because it's a show specifically about the Parsons Cross community, which is Parsons Cross is a really large housing estate it's a council estate, but it's huge. It's a whole community. It has 2 schools, hospital, it has everything. It's it's huge. It's one of the biggest in Europe. It was built for the steelworkers back in the 1950s. And it's a massive, massive place. And it's quite an insular community. They don't really even go into the centre of Sheffield very often, a lot of the people that live there. So he really wanted to get his community into the theatre. So we wrote this piece and based it in Sheffield. And anyway, he just had this meeting, and then he got a call from Michael, said, I've met these 2 writers, and one's a pop writer and one's a TV writer, and they've never done musicals before and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. So will you help them out? And he said, I found my writers.
Wow.
So we put what we've written already in the bin, and then we just started writing Jamie straight away.
Wow.
Isn't it amazing when the stars align like that? And like you have your first thing that you write and you're like, this is rubbish. But you bump into Michael Ball, who you met like 6 years before. And I love that when that happens, when it's someone, like the first way I got into improvisation was a lady rang me up and she said, 4 years ago we did a course together and I remember you were quite funny. Will you come and improvise a play with me? Wow. And in that play was this guy who had an improv show, and he said, well, you're quite funny. Will you come and join in my show? So it's just like someone from 4 years ago in your life just goes, actually, this is the reason you met that person.
Yeah, and our last episode, we were talking to Luke Kempner, who got a big break because Stephen Fry retweeted one of his videos or something. It's
amazing.
Like, if Stephen Fry's battery had run out that day, his life would be different.
All over.
I love that these things come about because, you had done this improv course, you had sought out that thing, and you guys were like, you had the impulse to write a musical in the first place. You had come together and said, we're so excited about musicals.
I still struggle with it, actually. It's the hardest thing is just to put yourself out there still. It really is. And if you're creative and particularly if you're a writer and you're self-employed, there's no one expecting anything of you, and you've got to kind of create something from scratch, and then you've got to kind of push it out into the world, and you've got to fight for it, and you've got to kind of justify it in a weird way. And obviously everyone gets massive imposter syndrome when they're creatives, so it's so easy to just go, oh, the world doesn't need another musical, the world doesn't need another song, there's plenty of songs, and the world doesn't need another play or whatever it is. So it's really easy to just back down, and sometimes just having someone who's as enthusiastic about it as you are to push you along and to bounce off is really wonderful experience. And I had that with the band. Yeah. If it wasn't for particularly one guy in the band who's just really pushy and a hustler and a just go-getter. If it wasn't for him shoving me out front, saying, you're the singer, you go and do this, I don't think the band would have ever have taken off and happened. I wouldn't have done it on my own, I don't think. I would have been happy creating in my bedroom, and I would have probably just kept it all to myself. And the same thing was with Tom. When I met Tom, I knew that he was going to be the one pushing it, calling me up, when are we writing, when are we going to get the next thing going. Sometimes you have to just surround yourself with pushy people who can do the pushy bit if you're not that pushy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm definitely the pushy person.
I can confirm that's true.
Hi Dan, did you get my message about the podcast? Would you want to come to the podcast, Dan? Hey Dan. Oh, why did I ever follow her back on Twitter? But no, it's really, I think that's really good what you say about him, and to hear you as a successful composer, musician, pop star, to say you still get imposter syndrome is both reassuring and obviously terrifying. And unfortunately for us creatives, there is no end to imposter syndrome. It's just perhaps with the practice of things going well, you go, okay, I remember this feeling, but I also remember that sometimes it bears fruit,
Yeah, and someone asked me about success the other day, and they said, well, what's that? How do you cope? What's your experience of it? I was like, my experience of it is it lasts for like 10 seconds, if that. And then it just goes away. Like it just, that even allowing yourself 10 seconds to enjoy your work. For me, it's such a fleeting thing that it didn't stick around, that idea of success. Even if you're aware that in your head, you're aware that something's going, the show's running or the album went to number one, whatever it is, that kind of exists in your, you get the news and you go, wow, and you have a little flush of success for like 10 seconds. And then it goes, oh, but I bet that one did better. And I bet it doesn't last that long. And I bet it's going to close in a month. And I bet this, whatever. And do you know what I mean? And you're kind of, all your doubts flood back in, and then you're back to normal, exactly as you were before it all started.
And I wonder as well if you describe yourself as sort of less of a front foot kind of guy, that that you're not pushy. That maybe that also makes you're not, because you're not in it for the maybe the fame is a better word. Success and fame, yes. I think are different things.
They are, yeah.
So being super famous, from what I'm seeing, doesn't seem to be something you're particularly into.
No, it's only nice if you're trying to get a drink.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you're at the bar and you're trying to get a drink, and if the barman recognises you and you get a drink more quickly than someone else, that's literally it. That's about the only good thing about fame.
You mentioned that you'd always wanted to write a musical. Have you always been a fan of musical theatre? What's your relation to that world?
I have a love-hate relationship with musical theatre. I think most people do, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's just a rich thing. I hate loads of musical theatre. Yeah. I hate it so much.
Number one hated musical.
Yeah, no, I can't. I'm not going to get minty about musicals in front of everyone. It's like, can you imagine?
What's your number one hateful music?
Cats.
Cats is pretty high up there for a lot of the Showstopper company.
I wanted to take drugs and watch Cats when Nicole Scherzinger. I thought if I was off my tits, that would be fantastic. Just watching, because I've never seen it. And someone said to me, oh my God, you've got to see it, but you mustn't be sober.
That's pretty good advice.
Right? So just do acid, drink something, I don't know, whatever it is, you have to be like somehow squiffy and then sit and watch Cats. So when I do finally see Cats, I will not be sober, I'm telling you now, because I'm going to get the full experience of how nuts that whole idea is. I don't like musical theatre when it's like the songs are desperately trying to do too much work.
Yeah.
Because my fear is that, because what happens is, right, when you're doing a musical, essentially you've got a story and there's acting happening and there's stuff happening and you're like, following it. And then suddenly someone starts singing, which is fine. If you're clever, you can get into the song in a way that feels like it justifies singing. But even then, you've got to sustain that 3 minutes or 4 minutes of music before you get back to the story. So what you can do is you can either make the song bloody brilliant and then you've got Over the Rainbow and nobody cares if it's not pushing the story along. Or you have a less good song and then you have to stick a load of plot into it. And then when it's really a boring song, there's more plot. Do you know what I mean? The songs sometimes you get a song that's mechanically kind of pushing plot along so much. Yeah. I sit there in the audience and go, why are you singing? Quite often I go, why are you singing?
Yeah.
This isn't doing anything psychological. It's not doing any subtext. It's not doing anything that we can't just have in a scene. Like, just put it in a scene and don't sing it at me. Just say it. Because there's a different kind, you know what I mean? There's a different kind of musical theatre where, and I think all the great ones, like even go back to the MGMs or the kind of with all the great American songbook stuff, is they are psychological songs. They talk about how someone's inner feelings are happening and it deepens your understanding of the character, as opposed to just trying to go plot,
Yeah.
plot, 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 you know, and
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of.
That's so funny because that's a conversation we have a lot when we're discussing our show. Because when we're improvising songs, it can be really easy to end up just singing a bit of dialogue, which is, as you say, it's just not interesting to anyone.
But sometimes you get a script and there's dialogue and you go, oh, that feels really like exposition.
Yeah.
Actually, that feels like that should be a song because
Yeah,
that would be better as a song
yeah.
than it would be as dialogue. And then that's when you go, as a songwriter, you go, brilliant.
Yeah.
This will be a song, and actually I expand on that, and in 3 minutes I can do what you've done in this paragraph, but I can make it really entertaining and gorgeous and really understood. And it's like it saves a bit of dialogue that would be clunky.
Which is why our shows are interesting in that way, because we have to make that decision on the hoof. Like, okay, is this a bit of dialogue that we should sing, or is this a bit of dialogue that we should be, should just
I'm amazed that you can do it, because I have no idea. I have no idea how this thing you do works at all, because everything I do is so planned and kind of like tweaked and manipulated and pushed into shape and kind of pulled into shape, and maybe an extra bar here just to let it breathe, or all that kind of stuff you do in musical theatre. To just do it like you guys do it is just insane to me.
Well, it's interesting though. You were talking about the blank canvas and and the paralysis of open space, and just like, and you're saying the great thing is just to start and just do something.
Yes.
Like that, that's exactly the space we're in. It's like you can't worry about what is going to be good or what is going to be right. You just got to start doing something.
Yeah, it's true. And our first, so we have a blank canvas, and then the audience gives us the title, the setting, and so then we sort of have those things, and then we go out and let those things inspire the first thing that happens.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, amazing. Well, I suppose what's nice is then that you've got plot moving at the same time as songs. So actually they can kind of complement each other as they go along, because one's adjusting for the other, which is essentially what we do when we're writing musicals.
Yeah.
We adjust one to the other all the time. They're constantly in dialogue. It's just that you do it in real time. It's just terrifying to me.
Yeah, Pippa, what's that phrase that we talk about in rehearsals, like broadening and widening?
Deepening rather than broadening.
Deepening rather than broadening.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that in relation to when we're improvising a show.
Right.
Whether we kind of feel like a lot of stuff needs to happen, or things might events might happen and actions will be taken, or whether we're at a place where we can take 3 minutes to spend with a character deepening into an emotion. And I just find that really, fascinating that we can get there.
Yeah, it makes a lot of difference, I think, in storytelling if you deepen a character, your understanding of a character, and you get a bit of subtext or even a weird bit of backstory or something. Because it's not like I don't like having story in songs, because I love country. Country music is all just about telling it how it is and storytelling.
Oh my God, I love country music. I have no idea.
I'm obsessed, absolutely obsessed. So, and what I love about country music is it doesn't hide behind anything. It just kind of goes and says it, but somehow it always does it in a beautiful way that doesn't feel like you're invading someone's personal diary. There's a weird place in songwriting, I think lyrics particularly, where you can have a lyric that's definitely hiding behind too much. Do you know what I mean? You're like, are you saying anything? Or you're just hiding behind poetry, and you're not really saying anything. You're not really connecting to anything. And that's terrible when it doesn't really mean anything. It just words that sound like they mean something, but they don't. And I hate that kind of writing. And I also don't like it when I'm listening to a song and I feel like I'm like reading someone's personal diary, and it's a bit too, you hurt me and I feel like that because of this. And when you said that really hurt me, and all that stuff. And when that gets put in a song, I go, oh no. So there's a beautiful place it's a beautiful place in the middle where the artist is giving something away, like telling a little bit of something, but also slightly nuancing it so it feels a little bit like you're peering into it, through a crack in a wall or something, as opposed to just being too out there. And that's like, and the beautiful place like Bernie Taupin lyric, which is quite far over to the obtuse, bizarre kind of place. Yeah. And then there's country music, which is not completely on that side, but it's still quite straightforward and out there, and just explains how you're feeling and what happened to you today or whatever. But it does it so beautifully that you get away with it, So there's and somewhere in the middle is where all the gorgeous stuff is, I think.
Yeah.
But in musicals, you can't be too obtuse. I think that if you tried to put Bernie Taupin stuff into a musical, you'd go, what?
Yeah.
Literally, where's the tiny dancer then? I'm looking for we're going to have to cast a tiny dancer.
Yeah, I think Sondheim talks about this a bit in his lyric book, and saying that the difference between lyrics and poetry is a musical theatre lyric has to be understandable on a first hearing. You can't take that away and mull over it and work out all the subtext.
You can't look at it on the page. You can't read it.
Yeah.
You're hearing it.
It's true, and the nature of like a musical theatre audience as well. I notice the difference between when I'm writing pop songs that are essentially for radio, because that's kind of the music I write. So essentially, if I'm writing radio music, I know that most of the audience are basically microwaving lasagna, or they're dropping the kids off to school in the morning, and then they're probably they're going to go and have a poo in the second verse. So you don't worry too much about it being a bit repetitive. You can put a cute line in because it's going to make the next line rhyme, and it doesn't really matter what that line. You can be a little bit less precise with it, and you can be a little bit playful, and you can put things that in a musical theatre song would be kind of blind alleys.
Right,
do you know what I mean?
yeah.
What was that? Did that mean something? Because the musical theatre audience are so focused. They're a captive audience, and they're focused, and they've just been following a plot line, a story. And then if you go and say something which is basically just a nice bit of arty fluff in a song that's in a musical theatre show, the audience get really they get caught in it, and they go, oh, what was that? What was that? Was I supposed to remember that? Am I supposed to know what that is? Is that going to come up later? Too many questions. You have to make it really precise, and every single line has to be, saying something which is relevant to the plot and relevant to the character and relevant to where you are. So it's a much more precise kind of songwriting, and I wish my pop writing was that precise, because it just isn't. I know for a fact there are sometimes I just put something and I go, I don't even know what that means. But someone's going to email me at some point, or tweet me going, oh, that lyric really meant a lot to me. And I'll go, it meant nothing to me, babe.
So glad that you found something in that.
Yeah. I just thought it sounded good.
Different for everyone.
I just needed something that rhymes with spoon. I'm sorry.
I loved your spoon song, by the way. So Dan, would you ever tread the boards in a musical? I'm thinking of Ronan in Once, I'm thinking.
Groaning Ronan.
Groaning Ronan.
Ronan. I'd like to. Yeah, I'd like to.
You would
actually.
like to. You're great.
I would like to, yeah. I mean, it's awful, isn't it? Because you think, oh, well, I'll just go and do it. And it's acting, which is like a whole different craft and a real skill, and not something I want to just like, oh yeah, I can do that. You know what I mean? I hate it when people do that. And all my actor friends will hate me if I just throw myself into a musical.
Well,
you know
lucky,
what I mean?
Dan, we've got all your actor friends here today. Would that make you nervous? Because that's an interesting conversation as well.
Yeah, my fear is that I'd hate it.
Okay.
My fear is that I would just absolutely hate it. And then it'd be like, oh, I've got to do 8 of these a week for the next 12 weeks or something, I feel like I'm hating this, but actually I actually think that I'd love it. I think that I really get something out of it.
Is there a part you'd love to play?
Weirdly, I'd love to play Hugo in my own one, because then I can sing my own songs. And it's his songs are the ones that I can actually sing. Some of them I can't sing, but I can sing Hugo's songs.
It's great as well. You can never get a note on that as well. It's like, no, that's not how it's meant to be.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. No, the MD will probably still tell me off.
Yeah.
I know you wrote this, but that was wrong. I'd give anything a go, really. I'm quite open-minded. If someone wants to cast me, I'll give it a go.
I can imagine you in like a classic musical. Like I can really see you in like a bow tie.
Yeah.
What would you
like Curly in Oklahoma?
Yes, great choice. It's just they're just about to start rehearsals in Chichester. If you want to give them a call, I don't know who they've cast.
I'm just going to go straight there. I'll just head down.
We'll get you a train ticket. I was going to say a bus ticket. I was like, who buys a bus ticket these days? I was going to get you a bus ticket because I'm already in the show.
Sadly true. Yeah.
And so, Jordan, what musical are you writing at the moment?
Oh gosh, I'm currently writing a musical about a family in Brighton. It's actually about them dealing with a daughter's chronic eating disorder.
Oh, wow.
It's 7 years of their lives, and it's very much about how a family can cope with something that makes being a close family very, very hard when they don't have a support network around them. I'm finding it really fascinating. I know you'll appreciate this. Writing a musical with English people in it. I think it's really hard making it feel right for English characters to sing out their big emotions.
Yes.
I'm finding it a massive, exciting challenge, but a challenge.
Yeah, you're right. Because we don't do that. We don't have country tradition.
So shy,
we don't have a tradition of saying it how it is, do we?
No, we have, because even our folk tradition's more like, oh, it's all a bit rubbish, but we'll all get on, we'll be okay.
Yes, and it all feels like 300 years old. Like it feels like really ancient. It doesn't feel like current.
Whereas the tradition of Broadway, like you can tell modern stories about, you know, small characters, big characters. And I've never sat, you know, in an American musical and gone, I don't know why you're singing right now, because, you know, it's an American teenager and I get why they might sing out their emotions. But, you know, but obviously with something like Jamie, I never sat at Jamie and sort of thought, no, you're a British teenager from the north. Why are you singing? I never thought that at all.
I was given a really great conceit to work for the very first time round, which was that we thought we would basically zoom into Jamie's brain. So every time we go into a number, it's not like it's actually happening in action. It's happening in Jamie's imagination. Jamie's this kid with all of these thoughts and dreams and ideas. He's bursting with imagination. So, you know, we basically zoom into, I mean, it's something that we are going to achieve much better in film than we are on stage, but we get to zoom into his pop video. You know, we get to see his imagination. And then as soon as the number's finished, snap, he's out of it. He's back in grey classroom in Sheffield and it's crap again. But, you know, while he's in his imagination, it all becomes fabulous. So there's a conceit there that's a little bit more, that was quite easy to work with, if you know what I mean.
Of course.
Because it's not a literal thing. It's like, okay, we're going to zoom into his imagination. And we did that with all the characters. And actually, I've started to think that actually with the other characters, it's still Jamie's imagination. So it's still his imagination of how he sees the world. And these other characters with their different voices are his view of them. So even when it's his mum singing, it's him, it's his imagination picturing his mum singing, if you know what I mean.
Totally,
That really helped when I got that as a kind of a note. You know
I bet, yeah. And also you're dealing with characters that aren't like shy, tea drinking Englishmen. They're
yes.
Jamie has such big emotions throughout that show, and he is such a big character that, you know, whether you're in his mind or out, you kind of have this expectation of something theatrical from him.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
You know, I can imagine made it feel quite nice and natural to be doing a musical for that. You know, I love that it's a musical. I think it's a really brilliant story as a musical, if you know what I mean. Like some stories you go, oh, I see why you might have made that a musical, but I think I'd have preferred to see the opera or the play. Whereas with Jamie, you know, I love the idea of his kind of projections in his mind, but also like, I would totally want to be in a musical if I was him.
It's funny, isn't it? Thinking about introverted musicals, actually, that's quite an interesting idea, because I'm just thinking about our heritage in musicals like Noel Coward, and isn't it very funny, and I'm really commenting on everything, and don't worry, I'm not really connected with it. Rather than, oh my God, the world is going to end, and I hate myself.
Or you do it in a really, actually, I think that one of the problems you might actually struggle with more is if they're middle class. Because it's probably a class thing as much as anything else. Because there's a middle class, shut down middle class way of doing everything in the, you know, that's the
I
the
don't
part.
know what you mean.
That's the British we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you talk about Oliver or something, and it's all very, you know, working class, or you know, you can go, you know, Chim Chimney and all that, you know, Mary Poppins, that feels like they're working class people. Of course they sing, they're down the pub, you know, having their knees up. That's kind of all right. That feels like it's okay to go there if they're not like middle class. But middle class is really tough. Because there's
repressed.
everything is repressed and not so. We have to write a load of songs that don't say what you mean, but kind of mean something.
Yeah,
do you know
which
what I
goes
mean?
back to your thinking about a musical theatre lyric not being kind of too complicated and stuff. Like, how can you do that?
Yes, how can you do it and say how it is? But then sometimes it is a case of even writing subtext in a song. You know, so you have a song that is essentially saying something that might be quite simple, but underneath it there's a subtext of something else, and that's interesting, and that could still work. You know. And that would, I think, as long as it's clear enough to the audience, then I'm going to get completely confused by it. That could be really beautiful, actually.
Yeah, and then it becomes an acting piece, isn't it? Then
yes, and then it becomes really quite beautiful if it's like got a kind of psychological story to it, but it's not obvious and it's kind of hidden. You find a language for these people, and really, let's face it, right? Musical theatre, quite a lot of it is going, okay, everyone, buckle your seatbelts. First number comes on. Happy villagers. This is what you're going to get for the next 2 hours. Deal with it.
Yeah.
And then once you're kind of over that bit, and you know, people have stopped gripping the sides of their seats, and you know, their toes have uncurled. then they can actually enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? Because that's one of the.
I think we've returned to the hate it bit of the love-hate relationship here, haven't we?
But every musical has to go through that little moment of like, oh God, they're singing. Oh God, you know, because I'm English and I'm middle class. That's what happens. I just go, oh God, you know, that little moment has to happen. It has to happen in every musical, and we try and sneak ours in a certain kind of way because we don't open with a number. But most musicals open with a number because they're going, you're going to get this for 2 hours. Just deal with it. And actually, you do. You know, after a while, you accept the language of the piece. You know, once-
It makes me think of audience participation, which has the same relationship as well, actually. It's like when I went to see Barnum at the New Wimbledon Theatre, starring Brian Conley. And it opened with, you know, the pre-show, which was sort of jugglers coming into the crowd. And my immediate reaction is, oh, God, and they're doing that. Oh, good afternoon, madam. Would you like me to juggle my balls?
I think a pre-show is literally the thing I hate the most in any theatrical performance. I hate a pre-show.
What? And I just like
Pre-show
for the
sucks,
listeners to know how much hate is in Andrew's eyes right now.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying,
awful, isn't it?
It's so funny because after 30 seconds, I was like, oh, that's all right. They're really talented jugglers and stuff. I had a great time, but my toes had to uncurl, whereas your toes would never uncurl.
No.
They would have stayed solidly cramped.
I like to, go into theatre, I like to get into the auditorium early and just sort of, relax and settle and, have the show start when the damn lights go down.
Your legs start early. Yeah, great.
How do you feel about them hanging around on the stage before the show starts? You know that thing, it started a few years ago and now loads of things do it. You go into the auditorium and the actors are kind of, it happens more in plays than musicals.
Yeah.
They're just kind of hanging around.
I just feel sorry for them.
On stage.
I'm just like, if that were me, I'd be like, I could have, started 15 minutes later.
Yeah, right. You just think that's great. I want to get my, my whatever it is, 5-minute call.
To be fair though, Andrew, we have a pre-show in our kids' show, don't we? Which is that we
That's
start.
great.
It is.
I thoroughly approve
just
of
wanted
that.
to point
It's
out
allowed
our
when
own
you do it.
hypocrisy, which is we come out and so this is the kids' showstopper show. It's we love this show so much love for it. And the kids have come in and we go out in our dungarees and we're sort of like a group of story clowns and we just point out kids and go like start singing songs about them and they just can't believe it because they can't believe that these songs are already about them. So
notice I keep that to a strict 4 minutes.
You do keep it to a strict 4 minutes.
Are you in charge? You're the timekeeper. Yes.
Well, speaking of songs, Dan Gillespie Sells, would you like to make up a song with the Showstoppers?
I'm gonna do the backing vocals. No, I'll give it a go. I am really hungover. So we'll see what comes out.
Let's see what happens.
This might be one of those magical moments.
We'll call
you
it.
You never know.
The hangover feeling.
Hello.
How are you feeling, Dan?
Oh, I've never done this before.
Well, that's exciting.
What should we sing about?
I don't know, but I feel like the control freak in me is just kind of going, I'm a control freak. I'm a control freak, and this is really out of control.
Should we sing about being control freaks?
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
I love it. Who's going to start? Are you going to start? Am I going to start? Who's going to start?
I don't know. Oh my God. Panic. I'm a control freak. I shouldn't be here. I'm a control freak. I shouldn't be here.
I'm a control freak. I shouldn't be here. I'm a control freak. Will someone save me?
Panic.
I'm a control freak.
Maybe I should be here.
I'm a control freak.
Every day I get up and I put the t-shirt on. I pick the very colors that I've planned. And every day I get up and I write myself a song. But I always make sure it's something that I've planned. This isn't planned.
Every morning I make my porridge, put the oats in the bowl, make sure that the milk is whole, make sure that the seeds are sown, and I fill my stomach up and I get the bus at 9:03, and that is the control freak in me. I'm a control freak. Will anybody save me? I'm a control freak. Can anybody hear me? I'm a control freak. Will anybody take my hand?
Will anybody save me from this crazy, crazy, crazy land?
Oh, what a man, I want to say. What a man.
Isn't he great?
That's so impressive. Really amazing to hear how he wrote those songs and his sort of openness as a sort of artist, I suppose.
Yeah, just so open about just sharing his process and so just relaxed with kind of who he is and what he creates. I think it's just wonderful to hear him speak.
And everybody was talking about Jamie. I really enjoy it. I thought it was a really brilliant musical. So if you are in town and thinking about going to see a musical, go and see Everybody's talking about Jamie. So you can talk about it too, rather than say, sorry, who's Jamie?
Yeah. And what we didn't get a chance to talk about was that, of course, they're making a film version of it.
Yes,
we didn't get a chance to talk to Dan about that, but I'm really excited for what that looks like when it comes out.
Yeah, I do love a film. Have they ever made, they haven't made a film of the musical of Billy Elliot, have they?
No.
Why am I bringing that up?
I have no idea.
Well, let's think about that.
While you're thinking about that, you can send us a message.
Oh, yeah. Send us a message. The Showstoppers is the Twitter one. And Instagram is Showstopper Musical.
Or you can look at us Facebook or look up our website, www.showstopperthemusical.com.
And if you've enjoyed this podcast, what would be wonderful is if you rated it. Maybe, I don't know, 5 stars?
Yeah, that sounds good. 5 stars has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
It does. It's my favourite kind of amount of stars because anything less than that is just not helpful.
Yeah. In fact, it's actively unhelpful.
So, rate or don't rate. There is no for, as Yoda, I believe, said.
That's an exact quote.
So be like Yoda and give us 5 stars.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.